Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I second Rob Whitman from Virginia's comments. This is very timely, and it's something that the state of South Carolina is very interested in as well, including our offshore areas in potential lease sale and developing the resources that we may have off our coast and benefiting from the jobs that will be created and the revenue sharing back to the state. Mr. Crookshanks, just real quick, you don't have to answer this question, but I wish your office could provide to my office, because you're doing the environmental impact statement, a single instance where a marine mammal's death was attributed to seismic. I've researched the internet. We've looked in other sources. I can't find a single instance. So if you have that information, I certainly would appreciate it, because we can't find a single instance where a marine mammal was killed based on seismic work. Mr. Miller, 300 million years ago, the tectonic plates and the continents were all together in an area called Pangaea, and those continents separated. Would you say that the geological features along the Atlantic coast are very similar to those you would find in North Africa and West Africa, because that area was connected to the eastern continental United States 300 million years ago?
Yes, sir. That's a play that's undertaking right now within industry. They're a conjugate margin between Angola, which is huge oil reserves, and Brazil. And they're looking at the same thing with the conjugate between Morocco, Mauritania, up into the east.
And there are oil and natural gas resources in that part of the world?
That's correct. And there's a lot of activity and a lot of money being spent in those two countries right now.
Just one other question. 1987, I think, MMS estimated in the Gulf of Mexico that there was about 9.57 billion barrels of oil. What did recent seismic and actual data from wells in the field show?
Off the East Coast or in Africa?
Well, no, just in the Gulf of Mexico.
No, in the Gulf of Mexico.
The 87 MMS estimate of 9.57 and what we're finding out there now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The Gulf of Mexico, the technology that was developed there with the 3D seismic and onwards from other types of improvements on 3D seismic, it was a 5-fold increase in reserves based on that technology before they put the drill bit in the ground. Since then, it's increased another 3. In the last 15 years, it's tripled. So it just shows.
So the estimate was about 10 billion barrels, and 5-fold of that would be almost 50 billion barrels. That's a big difference from what MMS expected to find based on old seismic data and what actually we're finding now with new seismic and well data. Correct?
That's very correct.
Okay, so let's fast forward to, or let's move over to the Atlantic coast. 30 years ago, we had seismic work done that estimated fairly significant reserves that are harvestable. But wouldn't you agree with me that if we use new 3D and 4D technology, new updated 21st century seismic technology, that we may expect to find significant differences between 30-year-old technology and today?
Yes, that's the industry is expecting to see that improvement and increase with the new seismic.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Professor Knapp, thanks for being here. Your valuable testimony and your experience brings a wealth of information in this committee. What geological potential do you see for the Atlantic in terms of oil and natural gas?
Thank you for the question, Congressman Duncan. And our group, as I alluded to in my statements, has been revisiting the tectonic and geologic evolution of the Atlantic margin, and we've come up, I think, with some surprising new details that play into both the evolution of the deposition of sediments, the organic richness of those sediments, as well as the presence or absence of large volcanic province that would affect the thermal maturity of the Atlantic margin. So there's a lot of new information, I think, that would need to be fed into revised seismic interpretations to really come up with a new and revised estimate of the resource potential.
Well, let me ask you this. What do you think the impact would be on institutions of higher education, such as University of South Carolina, from ramping up offshore seismic exploration and future production? What do you think that would, what kind of impact would that have on an institution of higher ed?
I think it could have a very important effect. I think there could be a very strong partnership, actually, between the institutions of higher education and training a workforce for the 21st century that is focused on the energy industries, especially if there's the potential for developing those resources there geographically. So I think there's...
Real quickly, because my time's up, but
Sure.
you mentioned in your research, in your statement, that there was some onshore seismic well data that's been called into question, more than 30 years of research on the Atlantic continental margin, suggesting that many previous interpretations of the geologic evolution were in error. Can you explain that? What do you mean by that?
Real briefly, that's not uncommon in science. That's the way science works. So we're constantly testing our hypotheses and coming up with new interpretations. But in this case, it's what I just alluded to, those features about whether there was a large volcanic province that developed on the margin that would have blanketed the entire area before the Atlantic opened. We've demonstrated now that that didn't exist, or if it did, it's no longer there. So there are things like that that are fundamental to our understanding of the tectonic evolution of passive margins where these deposits accumulate that have never been put into the resource estimate. So those are the kinds of...
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. I yield back.
Okay, now I'd like to recognize Representative Pallone for 5 minutes.